I am actually so thoroughly feeling this vibe. It might be a tad too arrogant to wear sunglasses on screen. Anyway, hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. My name is Gitte Mary and today I have a sort of think piece. I will just be talking about something that's been bothering me for a hot second. It's actually been bothering me for years, honestly, and I've talked about it briefly on Instagram a couple of times, and whenever I talk about fast fashion, I often end up talking about this as well, but I don't think I've made a specific video talking about this phenomenon. So that's what we're going to dive into today. Over the last few years, we have seen plenty of fast fashion shops making or launching secondhand platforms, marketplaces, apps, reselling initiatives, and take-back opportunities. All things that we usually associate with more sustainable and green fashion, or something that we typically associate with a level of circularity in a business. So having something that can be used in a closed loop without acquiring new pieces, using what we already have, repairing and gifting away to others, etc., etc. These are all things we talk about constantly, are really good for the planet and a really good way to sort of practice sustainable fashion. So now that all of these fast fashion platforms and companies are doing it as well, I think a question that naturally arises is it still sustainable when the fast fashion shops are doing it? Is this even relevant? Well, I think it is, because since 2020, we've seen an increase of 275% in secondhand platforms, in resale opportunities, in take-back initiatives from fast fashion shops. They're doing it a lot and they will be doing it continuously and even more so in the future. So I think it's really important that we as consumers are able to navigate what these systems mean and what these systems do and what they specifically don't do. In many ways, it's actually quite natural that the fast fashion companies want in on the revenue that's being generated from secondhand clothing. Consumers all around the world wants more secondhand apparel, wants more options when it comes to reusing and generally the circularity of secondhand fashion, and the systems around marketplaces, etc., is something that's just becoming more and more popular. The US secondhand market is expected to double by 2026, making it worth $82 billion. And with online resale platforms like ThredUp or Vinted or Depop or Facebook Marketplace and many, many others, 50% of the secondhand revenue is expected to come from online platforms by 2024. 70% of consumers think that now it's a lot easier to shop secondhand online than just 5 years ago. And it's estimated that over half of all consumers in the US have resold apparel in 2021. In 2021, secondhand shopping replaced nearly 1 billion pieces of clothing that would otherwise have been bought brand new. Now, the fast fashion industry produces roughly 100 billion pieces of clothing every single year. But secondhand fashion is definitely becoming more and more of a threat, pun intended, to the fast fashion companies. So what they are doing in order to combat this change is by launching secondhand platforms themselves. I've seen countless examples of fast fashion platforms that are now launching secondhand opportunities, reselling opportunities and initiatives, circularity efforts and take-back programs. We're seeing it all the time, and they're all described on the fast fashion brands' platforms as circularity efforts. When a term like circular economy, circularity, these terms that are being used quite a lot in sustainable lingo and in sustainable discourse are being thrown around a lot, I think it's really important to hold on to what they actually mean. Now, a circularity effort means that you're scaling down on virgin production, which also means that you're scaling down on consumption. You're scaling the consumption of new products way back and replacing those purchases with other types of services like maintaining, repairing, reselling. So you're replacing, basically, buying new things with buying things that are already in circulation. And that's the most important thing to note about circularity. And are any of the fast fashion companies planning on doing that? Nope, they are not. There is no evidence to suggest that any of these secondhand opportunities, take-back systems and schemes are resulting in scale back in virgin production. These companies are still producing the exact same amount, if not more clothing, whilst also catering to the consumer that seems more conscious. And there are many of these out there. We have the H&M Take Back program, we have the ASOS Marketplace, we have Urban Outfitters Newly Thrift and Newly Rent, we have Lululemon's secondhand reselling platform, and we also have Zalando's reselling secondhand platform, and on the surface they might seem great. They might seem like a great alternative if you don't want to go out and buy new clothing. However, when we just scratch the surface a tiny bit in any of these initiatives, they quickly turn out to not be as green as they promise. Urban Outfitters has Newly Thrift and Newly Rent, where you can buy secondhand clothing and where you can rent vintage clothing. That's sort of the vibe. However, on Newly Rent, only 8% of the clothing on their platform is actually pre-loved or vintage. The remaining 92% is brand new clothing. It's just fast fashion, according to a report from 2022 from Remake. And Urban Outfitters also still haven't paid their garment workers for the work they did during the pandemic. Just really wanted to add that in there. None of these brands are actually paying their workers fair wages, and we cannot really talk about circularity and sustainable production without also talking about human rights and fair living wages. Ideally, we'll decrease the amount of products that we make them better so the garment workers are being paid more and working less. That is an essential intersectional part of sustainable fashion. Fast fashion brands that are launching any of these secondhand platforms and opportunities to rebuy, resell, are just riding on the wave of the popularity of secondhand clothing while not actually making any meaningful changes in their supply chain or in their business model, which is really what they should be doing. The main problem with the fast fashion industry is the scale of production. When they're not actually slowing down production of new clothing, it doesn't matter what other nice things they're really doing. It also means that the revenue generated from their secondhand platforms will just be put into creating more fast fashion. I would categorize any effort from a fast fashion company to launch secondhand opportunities, resale opportunities, take back programs, etc. It's all greenwashing. It's a way of masking what they are actually not doing. It's pushing something forward that both press and consumers might be intrigued by. I want to talk about some examples here, so let's look at ASOS Marketplace for a second. ASOS is yet another fast fashion brand that is not using its secondhand platform in a way that supports degrowth of production. They are still overproducing and encouraging overconsumption. Actually, many fast fashion brands are throwing away tons of clothing that is not being sold. It just ends up in landfill, and products from Zara, H&M, ASOS, etc. in terms of textile waste is some of the most frequent things that we see in landfill, because it's not being sold, it's not being donated, it's just being thrown in landfill. Now, ASOS launched its secondhand platform back in 2010 as one of the first fast fashion brands that did so. And on the surface, it looks incredibly great. It seems like it's a platform where a lot of smaller brands and smaller boutiques can get out into a big, wide audience worldwide. Sounds really cool. However, there is a problem. ASOS is constantly looking for ways to grow. Recently, they just acquired Topman, Topshop, and Miss Selfridge, all companies that also have yet to pay their workers for the work they did during the pandemic. And the fact that ASOS acquired these companies just goes to show that they are not interested in degrowth, they're only interested in creating more things and also not paying workers, which is great. While ASOS describes ASOS Marketplace as a sister company to ASOS the fast fashion store, it's very unlikely to think that the revenue generated by ASOS Marketplace won't go directly into their big sister, the fast fashion store, which is definitely what's happening. There is a 20% commission rate, and that has to go somewhere. Arguably somewhere where output is the top priority. Other brands like H&M has these return schemes or return systems where you bring in old clothes, not old in the literal sense, but old in the fast fashion sense, where you've worn it for a couple of years, which means that it's either too brittle to be worn again, it's not maintained right because the quality of the items, let's be real, it's not great, or overall because things just work really fast in fast fashion. No duh. Things that are actually just perfectly fine will feel out of style really quickly. These things are brought into H&M and they are then going to be recycled or redistributed, and then the consumer that brings in the clothing receives a gift voucher that they can then use in the store. However, when the majority of textiles that end up in landfill come from companies like H&M, it's very unlikely to think that they actually end up distributing or reselling any of these things. They do. Absolutely not. And they also definitely don't recycle these pieces, because most fast fashion today is made from a combination of different types of materials and textiles, and they are very difficult to pull apart again. I really doubt that H&M has developed technology to do this and then not shared it with everybody. I don't think that's the case. I do think it's the case that they made a greenwashing campaign where Maisie Williams went through a sci-fi loop and then all of a sudden all of her clothes were magically recycled. I made a video about this campaign because it was so utterly hilarious. What I'm just trying to say is that they are just throwing those clothes away. A minority might be repurposed or donated, but for the most part it's going to be thrown away. Because what H&M is doing, and from an objective standpoint it's quite brilliant, is they're making people come back to the store and buy more things because now they have vouchers. And I think it's not a lot of money you get for a big bag of clothes. It's enough that you have to put in some money by yourself in order to get what you really want. Usually, I mean, I guess that's what they're depending on. So what this is a business model where you bring something in that you don't use, so it doesn't have any value to you. And then they give you a little bit of a reward, and then you come back to the store constantly. This is a way for them to generate revenue. It might not seem like it, but it's absolutely successful. These return systems are described as circular business models. However, what they're actually doing is that they're trapping consumers in a circle of consumption. I'm sorry for being so cheesy, it was right there. In Remake's 2021 Fashion Accountability Report, it showed that no fast fashion brands were able to document that their recycling schemes or their circularity schemes resulted in decreased production of clothing. None of them did. So when consumers support the fast fashion brands' reselling options, we're just putting money in their pockets, just as we would if we bought new clothing from them. Both resale, secondhand and rental options are becoming increasingly popular, but what these big companies are doing is that they're creating linear business models where they have these options, the sustainable options over here, and then their regular over-consuming, mass-producing production over here. And the rental, the vintage, the secondhand, the repair and recycle are not slowing down production anywhere. Actually, the combination of these two linear business models is actually encouraging consumers to purchase more things than ever. I just needed to vent about this for a while because it's something we're seeing becoming increasingly popular. And I think it's so important to be able to navigate this information that we're getting, because these companies are not going to tell us any of this themselves, for sure. But once we start to look at the reports, once we start to see and notice how they're marketing themselves, it becomes increasingly clear that they have no plan of slowing down production. So what we as consumers can do is that we can boycott them, stop supporting fast fashion, or buying simply only what we need. And moreover, supporting organizations and NGOs, etc., that are trying to create a better political framework so that these things cannot happen. Those are things that we can be doing. But we can also just start with wearing what we already have, repairing and maintaining the clothes that we already have, and we'll get really far. And buying secondhand is obviously amazing, but there are so many places to do it that doesn't support fast fashion still. And I think that's what we should be doing. And that was it for this video. Let me know if you want more within sort of this scope in this genre, if we should talk more about these different initiatives and sort of developments that we see in the fast fashion industry. Let me know if you want more of this. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day and take really good care of yourselves. Until next time, bye. Thank you so much for watching this video, and also a special thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys help me create green, zero-waste content, and I love you guys. You can find the links to my social media accounts down below and the link to my Patreon on this screen. Bye!